But not only is Caitlin Clark probable, Aliyah Boston is now listed as questionable. And we have massive fallout from Justine Pissot getting released. The Indiana Fever put up their own post, and the reaction is nuclear. The reaction is absolutely nuclear.
Aliyah Boston, now questionable. And that's not even the headline tonight, because the same day the Fever quietly added her to the injury report, they also released a statement that put their own fan base into open revolt.
When the Indiana Fever were making a mockery of the injury report early in the season, just putting Caitlin Clark as probable, knowing damn well she was going to play that game. This is why people reacted like,
Go back one line on that same report, and you'll see the pattern that started all of this. Probable, probable, probable. 5 straight games, the same word parked next to Caitlin Clark's name, and by the 5th time, almost nobody in Indiana believed it meant anything at all.
Facing an injury, when she's actually coming back from being out a few games, and they put probable, well, we don't really know what that means. Is she probable, like she's probably going to play? Is she probable, like she's coming back from a serious injury, so it kind of depends how she feels today, but she's probably going to be in there? Is she probable as in she's probably not going to play? It's very hard to actually...
Here's the problem with the word probable, sitting there with no context. It can mean 2 completely different things. It can mean, she tweaked something Tuesday, we're monitoring it, expect her out there. Or it can mean, she is weeks into recovering from a real injury, and this is a genuine coin flip. Those are not the same situation, and one word is being asked to do the job of both. In this case, it's the second one. Clark re-aggravated her back on June 24th against the Phoenix Mercury, landing awkwardly under the basket in the second quarter. Tried to play through it, got pulled in the third, and didn't suit up again for nearly 2 weeks. So when the Fever list her as probable for tonight's game in Los Angeles, that isn't a formality stamped on a schedule. That's a real, unresolved question about a franchise player's back holding up on the road. But the injury report itself isn't actually why Fever fans went into full meltdown mode this week. That anger is about something else entirely. A decision the front office made about a rookie who barely got on the floor all season. And it's about to blow up in a way nobody inside that building seems to have planned for.
Video. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below and subscribe to the channel. That would mean so much to me. Status report for today's game. Caitlin Clark probable with a back. Aliyah Boston questionable with right lower.
Look at the actual language on tonight's report, and it gets more specific. Clark, probable, back. Boston, questionable, right lower leg. 2 of the team's 3 all-star starters this season, both carrying question marks on the same night, and Clark doing it while averaging 21 points and better than 8 assists a game, tied for 3rd in the league in scoring. This is not a bench piece nursing a tweak. This is the engine of the offense. Clark, Boston, and Mitchell were all just named starters for this year's All-Star game a few days ago, which is exactly why tonight's report stings the way it does. And notice who isn't on that list at all. Kelsey Mitchell, the 3rd All-Star. Hold on to that, because it matters more than it looks like right now.
Leg. What's going on with this Indiana Fever training staff to why it always seems like somebody is listed on the injury report? Whether it's Sophie Cunningham, Caitlin Clark, Aliyah Boston, Lexi Hull. How come it always seems like somebody is listed on the injury report?
This also isn't a one-week story. Sophie Cunningham has cycled through the injury report. Lexi Hull has cycled through the injury report. Now it's Boston and Clark. At the same time, again, scroll through Indiana's season log, and there are very few stretches where that list is actually empty. At some point, where just unlucky stops being a satisfying answer, and a harder question takes its place. What is actually happening inside that building, week to week, that keeps producing this same result?
Stay healthy. What are they doing in practice is what the Vanderbilt player reported seems to be right. Shout out to the Pope for getting the exclusive. Are these practices too hard? I hate to even say that. I feel like a snowflake even saying that. But are these practices too hard? Are they running these players too much into the ground? Are we not really practicing on basketball? Are we just running, doing cardio and endurance work? And I'm not sure, but it doesn't seem...
Here's a theory that's been picking up steam, and it needs to be said carefully, because none of it is confirmed by the team. Back in May, Fever rookie Justine Pissot, a second-round pick out of Vanderbilt, was dealing with a lower leg injury, and when a reporter asked head coach Stephanie White for details, her answer was noticeably vague. She said she didn't have a timeline, mentioned that Pissot had dealt with something similar back in college, and left it there. A few days later, Pissot posted something cryptic online about not always believing the media. Neither of those things, on its own, proves anything about how Indiana trains or manages its players. But set them next to a roster that keeps cycling bodies in and out of the injury report all year. And it's not hard to see why some fans have started asking whether the conditioning, the workload, the actual practices are part of the pattern. Indiana hasn't said one word publicly about training methodology, and nobody outside that building has proven a real connection between any of it. This stays a question being asked out loud, not an established answer, and it deserves to be treated that way. But it is being asked, loudly, and it isn't going away this week. It also isn't a brand new complaint. The same health questions trailed this roster through last year's playoff run, when injuries thinned the rotation game by game deep into the postseason. A pattern repeating across 2 straight seasons is a lot harder to wave off as simple bad luck.
Don't give a you-know-what. This organization is a dumpster fire. Caitlin Clark must demand a trade. Once again, it should say Caitlin Clark is out probably due to back because the Fever organization and Stephanie White don't have her back.
Somewhere in that mix, you get the loudest version of this take. Fire the training staff. This organization is a mess. Clark should be demanding a trade. None of that is coming from Clark. She hasn't said anything close to it. And there's a detail that complicates any "this team is falling apart" narrative. Indiana is 12-8. That's first place in the Eastern Conference by winning percentage, ahead of a New York team with an extra win in the standings. Sunday, on the road, without Clark, they beat the defending champion Aces outright, 84-68, with Mitchell dropping 27 and Boston adding 18. By at least one count, this Fever team has now won 3 straight games with its franchise player sitting on the bench. This is a team playing its best basketball of the season during the exact stretch everyone online is calling a disaster.
Franchise. Hey, I hope Caitlin Clark plays today. The venue will be open if Caitlin Clark plays today. Between today's game and the Phoenix Mercury game tomorrow, today would be the day that I would bring her back to action and then sit her for the Phoenix Mercury game. If they do play her for a back-to-back, well, then I'm asking, then I'm saying, okay, so we're good to go? We're finally healthy?
Notice the timing here too. Tonight's game against the Sparks and tomorrow's game against the Mercury make up one of only 3 back-to-back sets on Indiana's entire regular season calendar. If Clark actually plays tonight in Los Angeles, the more cautious version of tomorrow has her sitting out in Phoenix, rather than risking that back on 0 rest, and nobody around this team would blink at that plan. That's a sensible way to protect a franchise player. But apply that same logic across the whole roster, and an obvious question shows up. If load management makes sense for Clark, why does it stop applying the moment you get to Kelsey Mitchell? Tonight's opponent, the Sparks, sit under Stu, 500 at 8-11. Exactly the kind of game a healthy Fever team should control, which is precisely why the health question carries so much weight right now.
Back-to-back between Caitlin Clark or Aliyah Boston. You're going to get one game, you're going to get the other game. Which is pretty ironic because the player who is going to play back-to-backs, the player who isn't on any type of minutes restriction, the player who always is allowed to play the most minutes in the games, Kelsey Mitchell, she's the player whose body actually broke down last year in the playoffs. So based on last year, if there's anybody that I'm going to be giving a break to, if there's anybody who I'm going to be wary of their minutes, it's going to be Kelsey Mitchell, so we don't get a scare like we got last year with her whole entire body seizing up.
Kelsey Mitchell is not on tonight's injury report, and she's almost never on it. She's the one player Stephanie White can write in for heavy minutes every night without a second thought. But go back to last September, Game 5 of the semifinals against Las Vegas, in a series where an injury-ravaged Fever team pushed the eventual champions to the brink before falling in overtime. A game where Aja Wilson and Jackie Young each scored 30 for Las Vegas on their way to the title. Mitchell had 15 points, was a perfect 3 for 3 from beyond the arc, and then her legs simply stopped working under her. She went numb for 5 to 7 seconds and had to be helped off the floor. It turned out to be rhabdomyolysis, a real and potentially dangerous muscle breakdown condition, essentially her own body cannibalizing itself from overuse. She was hospitalized, given IVs, and needed 2 full weeks before doctors cleared her. In the games leading into that collapse, she'd been logging 37 and 39 minutes a night while injuries picked apart the roster around her, on her way to a career-high 20 points a game and her first all-WNBA first-team selection. She's said publicly she doesn't regret any of it and would do it again to compete at that level. That's admirable. It is also exactly the profile of a player nobody in that building appears to be protecting from herself.
Why doesn't Kelsey Mitchell get rest? Why doesn't Kelsey Mitchell on a minutes restriction? Why isn't she ever on the injury report? Thank you, Justine Pissot. Justine Pissot should have gotten a chance over Dantas. When you have Caitlin and Kelsey, who are average defenders at best, you can't play Dantas, who is possibly the worst defender in the league. It's a good point. Dantas is not a good defender, not a great defender, not an average defender, below average defender.
So why isn't there a minutes restriction, or at least a real conversation about one, for the single player with a documented history of her own body giving out under this exact kind of workload? That's a legitimate front office question, and it's separate from anything involving Clark or Boston. It also connects to the other frustration bubbling up this week, the actual lineup decisions. With Clark and Mitchell both average at best defensively, there was a real case for leaning on a shooter like Pissot over a veteran forward like Damiris Dantas, whose defense has again been a soft spot this season after a stronger 2024. Fans arguing the fit made sense on paper are not wrong.
The problem, the most annoying part about this is that Justine, we didn't even get a chance to see her. We've seen Dantas for the last 2 years. Last year, we gave her the benefit of the doubt. This year, she seems to be picking up where she left off last year. 2024 is the year that seems to be the anomaly. Move on from Dantas. Why are we just focused on the now?
What makes this one sting is that Justine Pissot never actually got the chance to prove that case wrong. Indiana took her 25th overall in this year's draft out of Vanderbilt, where she transferred after starting her career at Tennessee, and where she shot better than 42% from 3 as a senior, posting career highs across the board. She flashed exactly that shooting touch immediately, scoring 8 points in 10 minutes in the Fever's very first preseason game. Then the injury hit. The vague update from White followed, and she barely saw the floor again all year. She was on a player development contract, one of only 2 such spots on Indiana's roster, which capped her at 12 regular season games no matter how well she played, while still letting her practice and travel with the team. Indiana simply never activated her into a contract that counted, even as some draft evaluators still viewed her as a potential steal of this year's class.
Players don't want to come to Indiana. It's hard for Indiana to sign free agents, whether it's the Fever, whether it's the Pacers, whether it's the Indianapolis Colts. Indiana's not really a destination like that. So if you have a player who's young, whose playstyle fits Caitlin Clark, why are we so eager to get rid of her? Why aren't we also going to think about the now and plan for the future?
And that is the actual pattern worth sitting with here. More than any single injury report, Indiana has a real, recurring reputation problem in free agency. It is not widely considered an easy sell for outside talent, and now it just watched its own young, cost-controlled asset walk out the door for nothing in return. The mechanism matters too. This wasn't some quiet trade Indiana orchestrated. Tuesday morning, Las Vegas tendered Pissot a standard rest-of-season contract offer. Under the league's rules for development players, Indiana then had 24 hours to match it by promoting her to the active roster. They chose not to. That's not misfortune. That's a decision, made in the same week the front office is already fielding hard questions about health and depth.
The Aces. Now, I think Justine is going to be a good pickup for the Aces. You have to ask yourself, why are we so eager to let her go? Yet the Las Vegas Aces, they're willing to get rid of Kennedy Carter to bring in Justine Pissot. Now, Kennedy Carter, folks, I made this analogy. I'm not sure how many of you follow football. Kennedy Carter is now striking me as the Josh Gordon of the WNBA. She is the Albert Hainsworth of the WNBA. She is turning into the Antonio Brown of the WNBA.
Because this is where it actually connects to Las Vegas. The Aces didn't just sign Pissot. They cut a rotation piece to create the room for her, waiving guard Kennedy Carter on Tuesday after she'd averaged 12.2 points a game on 60% shooting across 13 appearances this season off the bench. That kind of efficiency from a reserve scorer is genuinely hard to find, and losing it isn't nothing. But Carter's career has always carried the same subplot underneath the talent. The Atlanta Dream, who took her 4th overall back in 2020 and named her to that year's all-rookie team, suspended her the following season for conduct issues. The Los Angeles Sparks benched her and eventually waived her. Chicago declined to bring her back after a 17.5 point per game season in 2024, a year where she also ranked among the league's most efficient guards, becoming just the 3rd guard in WNBA history to make half her twos while attempting double digits of them a game. She spent all of 2025 playing overseas before Las Vegas gave her another shot this spring on a 1-year deal worth roughly $277,000. Immense talent, chronic instability. It's a pattern that shows up across pro sports whenever a front office decides the production isn't worth everything that comes attached to it.
Because I'd argue going to the Aces is like going to the Patriots. And if you can't make it work in the Patriots, if you can't make it work with Tom Brady / Asia Will, then you can't make it work. If you can't make it work with Bill Belichick / Becky Hitt, then you can't make it work.
After a loss to Dallas in late May, Carter posted online about still feeling like she was on a leash in Las Vegas. A comment that reportedly did not sit well in that locker room, based on former MVP Candace Parker's own read on the situation afterward. And the timing of the actual move wasn't emotional, it was financial. WNBA teams had until 5 o'clock Tuesday to waive players on non-guaranteed contracts before those deals became fully guaranteed for the rest of the season. Carter went scoreless in 15 quiet minutes against Indiana that Sunday. And hours after Pissot signed her offer sheet, the Aces let Carter walk rather than guarantee out the rest of a deal for a player they no longer fully trusted in that locker room.
The Las Vegas Aces got much less scary letting Kennedy Carter go. They got much less scary leaving Kennedy Carter go. When you got somebody like Kennedy Carter coming off the bench, someone who could drop 25, 30 off the bench in limited minutes, you get rid of that. You get rid of that type of production. That's one lethal scorer. That's one threat that other teams don't need to worry about. But I know Becky Hammond is glad that they have Justine Pissot now, who can stretch the floor and alleviate some of the double.
Whether that trade actually helps Las Vegas is a real question, not a settled one. Carter, even in limited minutes, brought the kind of instant bench scoring that can single-handedly flip a possession, the sort of weapon a defense has to plan around every time she checks in. Pissot gives Becky Hammond something different, outside shooting and floor spacing that takes real pressure off Aja Wilson working in the paint. One franchise traded scoring punch for structure and cost certainty. The other lost a cheap, promising piece for absolutely nothing, and still hasn't answered the actual questions about health, workload, and player development that got us here in the first place. Worth remembering, too, this is the same fever core that won last year's Commissioner's Cup and pushed a Las Vegas team, currently 15-6 and tied for the best record in the league, all the way to 5 games without a full roster. The margin between these two franchises is thinner than either fan base probably wants to admit tonight. Tonight in Los Angeles, and again tomorrow in Phoenix on the back end of a genuine back-to-back, we start finding out which version of this Fever team shows up, the 12-8 club playing its best stretch of the season, or the organization that keeps finding new ways to lose good players before anyone outside the building even notices what it had. So which is it, in your eyes? Is Stephanie White quietly building the deepest roster in the Eastern Conference, or is this front office bleeding talent it genuinely cannot afford to lose? Tell me where you land in the comments. Hit like on your way out, and subscribe if you want the next update the moment this story moves again.